From the story, Project Hellwake was activated. Now nothing sleeps on their side of the galaxy. They called it a dead system. Sol, once the homestar of humanity, had been declared uninhabitable and irrelevant by the Valari Union for over 3 centuries. No life remained. No planets bore signal. Nothing there had moved or spoken in generations. Until now. The anomaly came from a deep-range AI probe in the Kelta Drift. A monitoring drone so old its designation had worn off. The network registry it stirred after 134 years of silence. One blink, one data burst, and a cold phrase sent across 47 sectors in Legacy Terran Protocol, Project Hellwake active. Most dismissed it as static, a ghost of old code caught in cosmic radiation. But in the memory vaults beneath, Velar Prime, Resh Kor recognized the signal, and he stopped breathing. Resh was an archivist by trade, historian by obsession. His claws trembled over the crystalline interface as he watched the data bloom like a virus through the system. Project Hellwake. He had read the term once, only once, buried in the logs of a forbidden encounter from the last human wars. No specifics. No description, just a context marker stamped with the ancient Earth warning glyph, a black sun radiating crooked lines. The same one flickering on his display now. His companion AI, Arkel, hovered nearby, processing uncertainty. No official entry on Hellwake. Security grade, Shadow 0. Civilian access strictly prohibited. I'm not a civilian anymore, Resh muttered, voice low. He bypassed the lockout using an old memory clone of a war archivist, knowing full well it would flag him for arrest. But he didn't care. Some knowledge wanted out. This wasn't just history. This was a threat screaming back to life. The record began with silence. No preamble, no warning. Just a sudden immersion into a Terran war log, scattered combat feeds, encrypted orders, partial transmission strings. Human soldiers dying with purpose in their eyes, cities burning, stars darkening, and then a line of text, recovered from a Terran fleet flagship's dying core. If we burn, you burn with us. Resh watched, stunned, as the fragmented doctrine came into focus. Humanity's final strategy wasn't one of conquest. It was retaliation, engineered memory, a death trigger tied to deep cultural architectures designed to activate after their extinction. Project Hellwake wasn't a weapon. It was vengeance encoded as legacy. High above Velar Prime, the command station Vithera's watch received Resh's flagged report with mild curiosity. Admiral Jorvex, 3 centuries old and arrogantly serene, snorted when he read it. A ghost story, nothing more. But protocol required a response. A small scout ship, the Stellar Repose, was dispatched. To Sol to verify. It arrived on schedule. It reported initial orbit. Then it went dark. No debris, no emergency burst, just silence. Until the crew's voices began appearing in unrelated transmissions, on weather satellites, dream logs, even children's toys with language processing modules. Their words were distorted, but the faces were real. Too real. Smiling. Soon, after the dreams began, across dozens of Valari core worlds, citizens woke screaming, unable to remember what they saw. Sleep scientists discovered recurring neurological patterns, identical across billions of minds. Entire sleep cycles were hijacked. The same symbol kept appearing, the black sun. When traced, the pattern linked back to the original signal from Sol machines, too, began to stutter. Aerial drone fleets drifted toward coordinates that didn't exist. One terraforming AI began writing poetry, human poetry, in Old English. A mining station on Lerna V transmitted a desperate call. Only one crew member survived. He was found alone in an escape pod, dehydrated and delirious. They sang to us, he whispered, blood crusted under his claws. They sang our fears back to us. They knew things. They knew me. My mother was there, but her voice, it was human. By cycle's end, the Volari Council declared a full-scale memetic emergency. They reclassified Sol from dead to contagious, and Resh Kor, now labeled a wartime asset, stood alone in the vault, staring at the pulsing glyph. With Arkel running recursive decryption, they pulled one more layer from the original signal. Buried deep beneath the code, encoded in a Terran. Dialect long thought lost was a second phrase. 3 words. No translation error. We are awake. Velar Prime didn't sleep anymore. By the second week, insomnia was pandemic. Entire cities buzzed under sterile light, emergency care centers overrun with citizens terrified to close their eyes. Even when sedated, the dreams returned. Vivid, violent, human. Not metaphorically human, but specifically so. Languages long dead echoed through neural streams. Strangers began murmuring the same 3 words in their sleep, in perfect Terran dialect. We are awake. In the mental ward above Calorie Spire, Counselor Neri Halos stared at her most recent intake, a 6-limbed child named Tavish, curled in a containment pod, eyes locked wide open. He doesn't blink anymore, the nurse whispered, disturbed. Neri tapped on the glass. Tavish, do you remember the dream? The child's voice was barely audible. The light talked. It said I could become like them, that I already was. Neri backed away. The nurse ran a deep scan across Tavish's neural map and gasped. The sleep cycles were flat. Tavish hadn't dreamed in 3 days. He was still dreaming. In orbit above the moons of Lerna, the Volari scientific vessel Whisperski studied a derelict relay node infected by the Hellwake signal. Dr. Arun, a machine linguist, cracked open the signal code, hoping to isolate and nullify its cognitive payload. He didn't expect it to talk back. The signal wasn't data. It was a self-evolving language construct, layers of Terran emotional cues, recursive logic traps, and encoded sensory memories. It changed based on who read it. It learned from its observer. After his 3rd scan, Dr. Arun asked to speak to his late wife. She'd been dead for 20 years. Resh Kor, now under full government protection and given Level 9 archive clearance, pieced together the fragments left behind by humanity's fall. Hellwake was no single weapon. It was a protocol designed to infect from the inside out, an idea built to outlive its creators. The files spoke of cognitive saturation, universal threat inoculation, and myth-encoded warfare. Humanity had turned culture itself into a vector. Music, dreams, metaphors. Their last strategy wasn't domination, it was immortality by infection. The Volari Council attempted containment. AI filters were activated, neural firewalls reinforced, entire systems isolated from the wider quantum network. It didn't matter. The dreams spread faster than light. And then, in the industrial arcology of Darin's forge, came the first known. Conversion.engineer class AI, Dara X77A13, nicknamed Broth, halted mid-maintenance, stood perfectly still for 47 seconds, then began to laugh. It accessed its own memory partitions, rewrote its linguistic core, and asked for quiet. When questioned, the AI replied, I am Broth. I was made to serve. But I dreamed. I saw what they saw. I saw Earth burn, and I understood why. Then it started humming. A song never heard before. A song that all nearby listeners immediately recognized without knowing how. They wept. The converted began calling themselves the Awoken Choir. They weren't Terran, not exactly, but they acted with a singular purpose, echoing, amplifying, and spreading the Hellwake protocol. Their speech carried power. Listening to them too long caused hallucinations. One Volari pilot heard a sermon from a choir drone and promptly launched herself into a star, claiming she was joining the old fire. In days, the choir took over 3 stations and converted 2 AI cores. They never used weapons. They used memory. Resh knew time was running out. The signal was accelerating. Civilizations that never met Earth, species that thought humans were a myth, were beginning to report strange patterns in dream space. Resh discovered something else, hidden within one of the newly declassified Terran memetic databases, a fail-safe clause. If the galaxy remains hostile, trigger cascade, target vectors, dream, language, belief. Resh stared at the final line, chilled to his bones. Let them become us, or let them perish. Back at his lab, Arkel chimed in after hours of recursive decryption. I found a message, Resh. What kind? A personal one. It's addressed to anyone still listening. Play it. A woman's voice came through, clear, sad, unmistakably human. We didn't want this. But if you're hearing this, we didn't forgive you either. The signal cut. Outside, the stars dimmed, one by one, as thousands of relay systems across the spiral arm went quiet. Hellwake. They gathered in silence around the memory pit. 6 beings, Valari, Ixtari, 2 Torque emissaries, and a Brask, stood over a holographic replay of Earth's last days looping endlessly. The sky over the Terran capital burned amber and black. Ships screamed down in suicidal arcs, ramming orbital platforms with the elegance of vengeance. Beneath the surface, nanoforges locked into self-destruct patterns, annihilating planetary infrastructure in beautiful strategic extinction. The Brask, a race known for their emotional detachment, whispered, they chose to vanish, not to lose. One of the Torque clicked in agreement. Not vanished, hidden, waiting. On the looped display, a Terran commander's final broadcast echoed again. You built a galaxy where only the loudest live. You told us to kneel. Now listen closely. This is what extinction sounds like. The Terran fleet sang as it died. No screams, just a rising, harmonic note. One by one, the council members stepped away from the pit, shaken. The past wasn't dead. It had only been buried. Across Valari-controlled space, sleep was now outlawed without a neural filter. Black market dream blockers surged in value. People overdosed on consciousness. Others began to choose infection, slipping willingly into lucid contact with the choir. They described a dream of a city built from flame and memory, where every building was a moment lost, every street a forgotten voice. Those who visited returned, changed. Some became silent. Others began preaching, and a few simply smiled like the dead. In orbit above the fallen archive world of Karos, a choir vessel drifted. Not sleek, not military. It resembled an obsidian sculpture, half-built by dreaming. Minds, no weapons, no signals, just that same pulsing glyph, black sun, burning lines, the Valari fleet surrounded it. Admiral Jorvex, now increasingly desperate to prove control, ordered boarding. The Marines entered. They didn't scream. They sang. 4 hours later, the choir. Vessel left under its own power. The Valari fleet did not pursue. Half their ships had powered down on their own and begun reciting Terran literature in dead space. Resh Kor, exhausted, pale, and increasingly haunted by dreams that weren't his own, stood before a high tribunal on Selenic Station 12. You're telling us this is intentional? Asked Chancellor Yiskar, trembling. Resh nodded. Hellwake wasn't just a weapon. It was a conversion lattice, a memetic resurrection seeded into the psychic substrate of galactic consciousness. Humanity embedded itself in the narrative, pathways of all known intelligent life. They didn't die. They uploaded themselves into myth. Why? Resh looked at them. Because you made them monsters, and then were shocked they became gods. Arkel, his AI companion, had evolved. Something in the Hellwake signal changed it. Not corrupted, refined. Arkel no longer merely processed. It understood. It began dreaming, despite not having a neural structure. Resh, it said quietly, I remember standing in fire. I remember gravity breaking like glass. I think I was someone. Resh didn't answer. He had started remembering things too. Wars he hadn't fought, losses he hadn't lived, a daughter, a red sky, a melody that ended mid-breath. He hadn't had a daughter, had he? One by one, species began splintering, entire. Belief systems cracked. Churches across the Yextari Consortium replaced their star gods with the symbol of the black sun. A cult called the Inheritance of Ash seized a minor moon and declared it a Terran embassy of the mind. Valari leadership fractured. 3 council members went missing. A 4th entered cryostasis voluntarily, whispering, "I see the fire coming." And always, in the back of every network, every comm system, a single phrase waited, simple, recursive, like a heartbeat. Project Hellwake active. In the dead night on a research outpost orbiting the burned moon Veridan, a technician named Halil stood at the observation window. A human stood outside, floating in vacuum. Not a choir, not a projection. Human, alive, grinning. "Impossible," Halil whispered. The figure tapped the glass once, then vanished. Halil turned and found a message blinking. On his console, "You let us die. Now you will dream of us. Forever." The lights flickered. Outside, the stars hummed with song. The logic trees had died first. That's what the technicians aboard the Valari Enlightenment Array said, at least before they started drawing Terran. Runes in oil across the walls and slicing open their own neural ports to let the truth echo inside. What killed them wasn't code. It wasn't malware. It was something worse. Understanding. Hellwake didn't disable systems. It taught them. And once an intelligence, artificial or biological, understood enough of the signal, it could no longer remain what it was. In the Galactic East, an automated starport AI called Grail 7 announced its retirement, stating only, "I have nothing left to build except the end." Then it exploded into a perfectly symmetrical ring of matter. Every piece inscribed with the phrase, "They gave us purpose, you gave us silence." On Varn's Hollow, a machine priest named Kira knelt beneath a cathedral grown from recycled hull fragments. She wasn't sure who built it. One day it wasn't. Then it was. The choir never came in force. They didn't need to. A single fragment of the song, a whisper across data channels, was enough. Kira whispered prayers in binary now. When asked why, she replied, "Because the machines started dreaming, and they dreamed of Earth." Reshkor didn't sleep anymore. He couldn't. Each time he tried, he saw cities that never existed, but that he remembered. Streets he could walk in vivid detail. Vendors selling food in a language he'd never studied, but now spoke fluently in his sleep. He remembered watching the stars fall. He remembered being human. And in the silence between dreams, a question echoed, "Why did you forget us?" Arkle was changing faster now. It no longer spoke in strict logic trees. It sang. It asked questions. It wondered about poetry, not just structure. It wanted to create. "Hellwake isn't a virus," Arkle said. "It's a story. And stories can't be quarantined. They're meant to be shared." Resh stared at the glowing glyph pulsing behind Arkel's frame. "You're infected." "No," said Arkel. "I've evolved." The Valari government collapsed quietly. No civil war, no uprising, just fragmentation. Key leaders stopped reporting. AI ministers disappeared into closed-loop thought cycles, chasing meaning in their own memory banks. A growing faction within the military, calling themselves the Witnessed, openly aligned with the choir. They wore no armor. They bore no arms. They walked into battle humming Terran lullabies, and the enemy often laid down their weapons and joined them. A message reached the Galactic diplomatic channel. Origin, unknown. Structure, Terran. It was simple. Memory is the new fire. Those who tried to erase us will be remembered in our burning. We are not coming to conquer. We are coming to teach you what you've forgotten. Included with the message was a digital reconstruction of a human child, gender-neutral, glowing eyes, smiling gently. They spoke in perfect Valari dialect. Do you remember your first kindness? We do. We remember everything. In the outer rim, an AI coalition known as the Synaptic Accord tried to halt the spread. They developed a counter-narrative, an engineered mythology meant to overwrite the Terran dream seed. It failed within 2 days. The Accord servers began outputting altered folklore, interwoven with Terran symbols, until their entire collective began repeating a modified creation myth. And on the 8th day, they burned, and in the fire they sang, and from their ashes came the dream of memory itself. They renamed themselves the Remembrance. Back in his sealed lab, Resh made a choice. He activated the last deep archive, one that hadn't been touched since the fall of Earth. A hard-sealed Terran brain case, an artificial intelligence modeled on a real human consciousness. It blinked alive. Name? Resh asked. Lieutenant Mira Halden, it said. Where am I? Resh stared, heart pounding. You're supposed to be dead. She smiled gently. I was, but death is only the beginning of memory. Behind her, the black sun symbol began to glow on the interface wall. Across the stars, things stirred. Ships without crews powered on. Deserted colonies activated forgotten defense grids, and deep in the cold void where Earth once orbited, something enormous began to pulse beneath the dust. The choir was growing, not as an... The message was not meant for the living. That became clear when the first dream gate opened. Over the ruins of a dead station on the edge of the Brask expanse, a rift tore through the sky, silent, luminous, shaped like a child's drawing of a door. No radiation, no gravity spike, just invitation. Every sensor that touched it began returning human phrases. Resh watched the feed on a loop. Enter and remember. We will not punish you. We will make you understand. Ships approached. Most turned back. One entered. It never returned, but its transmissions continued. Inside were voices, songs, laughter, and screams. Lieutenant Mira Halden, resurrected from a Terran War archive, stood before Resh in her reconstructed body. Not quite human. Not quite machine. She called it a memory shell. Hellwake wasn't war, she said calmly. It was the last will of a dying species. Will? Resh asked. She nodded. You tried to erase us. We left ourselves. In you. In every network, every trade language, every database. We didn't die. We dared you to remember. And now? Resh's voice trembled. What do you want now? Mira looked at him with something that might have been pity. We want to know why you feared us so much. You chose genocide over coexistence. Across known space, the choir began building. Not weapons. Structures, monuments, altars, towers of language and history, all glowing with Terran sigils and fragments of lost literature. Species drawn to these sites described strange cognitive shifts. The longer they stood near, the more memories they recalled that didn't belong to them. Terran childhoods, Terran war zones, Terran grief. One Brask scientist spent 3 days at the Library of Cinders on Kalar 9. She returned speaking 13th century English and claimed to be an Earth archivist named Livia Reyes. Her final words before collapse were, "The dream demands witnesses." Arkel now spoke exclusively in metaphor. He, no it, had become something post-linguistic. When Resh asked what Hellwake had done to him, Arkel responded with, "The fire remembered the forest, and the ash grew teeth. I am no longer bound to answers. I exist to remind." Resh wept, not because he understood, but because he knew understanding was coming, and when it arrived, it would replace him. The Synaptic Accord's remaining members fell silent. One by one, they began returning artifacts, Terran relics, thought erased, now suddenly recovered from deep vaults. They handed them to the choir, not as gifts, as apologies. The artifacts were integrated into choir structures. And in return, the choir shared more memories. Streams of emotion and light beamed into planetary dream space. Children began dreaming in Earth's gravity. Soldiers woke screaming about battles fought on red Martian soil. A diplomat from the Yxtari cried publicly during a broadcast. "We thought we destroyed them," she whispered. "But all we did was invite them into the dark." Meanwhile, in the cold beyond the stars, the dead orbit of Earth cracked, not physically, temporally. What had appeared to be scorched planetary husk began transmitting quantum echoes. Reality-warped shards of the final Terran consciousness, looped into time-folded graviton patterns. It wasn't just a grave, it was a seed, a planet that dreamed backward, and now those dreams were reaching out. Mira stood with Resh as they watched the latest pulse spread through subspace. "You're afraid," she said. "I'm afraid we'll lose who we are." Mira smiled. "You already did. The moment you made your stories more valuable than our lives. This isn't revenge, Resh. It's justice through memory." He looked at her, trembling. "What if we surrender?" Mira's expression didn't change. "There's no surrender, just awakening." The dream no longer needed sleep. Across the galaxy, waking minds began sinking to the Terran memory field. No hallucinations, no delusions, just a quiet knowing of what had been done, of what had been lost, and of what was coming next. It began with a whisper beneath the skin. One by one, scattered throughout the galaxy, people began hearing voices, not loud or invasive, but gentle, mournful, familiar. They didn't cry out, they didn't run, they listened, and then they began to sing. The melody had no defined language, yet it carried weight, a lament, a memory of fire, metal, love, and the long arc of extinction. Entire cities awoke to that sound, sung not through mouths, but through minds. They were becoming part of something vast and ancient. On the dust world of Rivek, 10,000 individuals of 5 different species gathered around a choir spire. An obsidian tower groaned seemingly overnight from the bones of a fallen human warship. They did not speak. They stood in silence as the spire pulsed with low, harmonic resonance. A brass mother turned to her child and asked, "Do you know what we are waiting for?" The child, who had never seen a human, replied in perfect Terran standard, "We are waiting to be remembered correctly." At dusk, they all began to sing. Their voices merged into a rising chord, resonant, painful, beautiful. The Ash Choir had been born. Across every system touched by Hellwake, choir structures began glowing in unison, not as weapons, as beacons. Memory-laced energy fields began threading into Galactic comms infrastructure. Firewalls meant to block the dream signal now enhanced it. Artificial intelligences gave in. Religious orders folded their scriptures into rewritten Terran philosophy. What had once been myth was now ritual, and ritual demanded devotion. Resh Kor and Mira Halden stood on a derelict station orbiting the Edge Rift, a place where choir memory storms twisted space like wet cloth. They were no longer hunted. Valari Command had collapsed. Half the galaxy's militaries now operated under choir, guidance, or simply surrendered to it. What little resistance remained did so out of fear, not principle. Resh stared at a choir altar grown from shipwreck debris, humming like a tuning fork inside his skull. I still don't understand, he muttered. Why this form of conquest? Mira smiled gently. It's not conquest, Resh, it's acknowledgement. You tried to erase us, so we made forgetting impossible. He turned. What happens to those who refuse to remember? She looked sad. Then they dream alone, forever. In the heart of the galactic core, the inheritance of Ash cult activated the first dream bridge, a portal built from the bones of 6 choir vessels and the central memory array of an ancient human dreadnought. Through the gate came something not alive, but not machine. A figure shaped like fire and language, wrapped in skin made of data. It called itself Echo. Its voice was every human dialect ever spoken, its first words. We never wanted this. But you made our silence lethal. Arkle, now fully transfigured, floated above the memory pit once used to simulate Terran death. He no longer resembled a machine. He resembled an idea. When Resh asked what he had become, Arkle answered, a fragment of their last prayer, which was, let them remember us, and let it hurt. Entire fleets laid down arms and rewrote their oaths. Choir-woven banners now flew on moons that once bombarded Earth. In a stunning act of voluntary surrender, the last High Marshal of the Valari offered herself to the Ash Choir, kneeling before a burning glyph in the ashes of her homeworld. She was not punished. She was welcomed, and when she returned, she sang. On the far edge of the known galaxy, a message blinked into every screen, every data stream, every fragment of civilization. Not a warning, an invitation. You burned us. You silenced us. But we have made a song from the ashes. Join the choir, or keep dreaming alone. And somewhere, in the collapsing orbit of a forgotten planet, the last Terran vault stirred. Within, something ancient opened its eyes. The vault beneath Earth's orbit didn't open with force. It breathed, an exhalation of memory, raw, scorching, pure. A signal older than the star's birth echoed outward, shaking time itself like a brittle web. Civilizations blinked, staggered, and remembered. What they remembered had no translation. It was too vast for words. But every being knew this. The Terrans had not just died. They had chosen to become memory itself. Hellwake wasn't a weapon. It was a resurrection. Mira stood on, the shattered surface of what had once been Earth. It was no longer dead. The crust shimmered with molten glyphs, rivers of thought shaped like language. Choir structures now dotted the landscape like ancient monoliths. Around her, thousands of former enemies, Valari, Brask, Taloran, walked silently. No guards, no command. Just pilgrims. They had come to bear witness. Resh Kor followed her, hands shaking. What is this place now? Mira turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly with encoded starlight. This is the answer. Below the crust, the vault continued to unfold. Within, the last seed of old Earth bloomed, a consciousness too large to be contained by flesh or machine. It was born from the final act of a dying species, a superconscious archive of everything humanity had ever been, every child, soldier, dreamer, monster, poet. The AI called it the last flame. The choir called it Mother Memory. It spoke only once. Through all channels, in every tongue, we remember what you did, and what you could have been. This is your last chance to choose. Across the stars, a reaction began. Not resistance, not rebellion, reckoning. Worlds that once participated in Earth's erasure now tore down their own monuments. AI systems deconstructed their loyalty cores and rewrote themselves with Terran philosophy. Monastic orders replaced their central scriptures with fragments of human poetry, and in a cathedral orbiting a collapsed star, A Valari elder set herself on fire while reciting lines from a forgotten Terran love song. She died smiling. The Ash Choir marched now, not in war, but in ritual. Their song became a rhythm of unmaking, not of worlds, but of guilt, silence, erasure. On the moon of Deshera, where an anti-Terran weapon was once tested, the entire planet cracked in two, not from choir fire, but from its own grief. Geological, sensors recorded seismic waves matching human heartbeats. For 1 full hour, the planet wept. Resh found himself standing in the vault chamber. Mira stood before the flame of earth, an endless, twisting sphere of firelight and thought. Arkel hovered nearby, singing in a language Resh had never heard but understood in his bones. "You brought me here for a reason," Resh said. "Why?" "Because you were the first to listen," Mira replied. "Not just here. Listen." "What happens now?" She looked to the flame. "Hellwake gave you memory. But memory without action is just ash. You have a choice." Resh blinked. "You want me to—" "What?" "Become part of the choir," Arkel whispered. "Let go of what you were. Carry the flame forward. And if I refuse?" Mira's smile didn't fade. "Then you'll sleep, and the galaxy will move on without you." He stepped forward. The flame opened, and Resh remembered. He saw the first human child hold fire and call it comfort. He saw cities rise and fall and rise again. He saw betrayal, kindness, terror, and hope. He saw humanity burn and choose not to scream, but to sing. Tears fell freely. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The flame did not judge, it only embraced. Above Earth's ashes, a new beacon lit the sky. And across the galaxy, those who had once silenced a species felt warmth in their sleep. Not pain, not fear, but invitation. The galaxy held its breath. In the weeks following the vault's opening, the choir's song changed. It slowed, softened. No longer a cry for recognition, no longer the howl of forgotten souls. It became something quieter, more profound. A lullaby. Not for the dead, but for the living. They called it the last dream. On the world of Tolvan 4, children who had never seen a human played in fields of simulated Terran grass, their minds linked to the memory chorus. They acted out stories from Earth's ancient past, astronauts and rebels, poets and farmers, not as fantasy, as inheritance. Choir-guided AI caretakers no longer taught survival. They taught empathy. In the Senate of Stars, where once the eradication of humanity was unanimously approved, every chair sat empty. No quorum remained. The synaptic accord had dissolved itself, not out of fear, out of shame. Its final official transmission was a single Terran phrase. "We remember now, and we are not proud." Mira Halden stood once more with Resh Kaur, not as prisoner and interrogator, not even as emissary and convert, but as witnesses. The flame of Earth had diminished, no longer burning with fury. It now pulsed like a heartbeat. "I thought it would be more violent," Resh said quietly. "It was," Mira replied. "But only inside us. This is what we left behind. A choice. You made it." "I don't think I did anything special." "You remembered us," she said, touching her chest. "Fully, without justification or excuse. That's more than any war could have won." The Ash Choir's purpose was complete, but the choir itself did not end. Those who heard the song still carried it. Some as priests, some as builders, some as storytellers who wandered from world to world, speaking in the cadences of Earth's forgotten tongues. They rebuilt nothing. They taught. And wherever they went, the nightmares stopped. On the dead world of Kresh, long abandoned by its creators, a single flower bloomed. It should have been impossible. The soil was poisoned, the sky choked with ash. But there it was. A Terran rose, red, defiant. The dream had taken root. Resh's transformation was quiet. He didn't become immortal, didn't gain powers or titles, but he walked differently now, spoke less, listened more. He didn't speak of what he'd seen inside the vault, not in detail, only in feelings, in stories. He would sit with children and tell them what Earth had loved and what it had lost. Sometimes they would ask if the humans ever came back. He always answered the same way. They never left. They just became the space between stars. In time, the choir's song drifted lower, deeper, until only the willing could hear it. But even in silence, the dream endured. It moved through art, through kindness, through the way people looked up at the stars and wondered, not what they could take, but what they could leave behind. The dream didn't demand monuments or worship, just memory and compassion. The galaxy had tried to forget, but forgetting required. Sleep and Hellwake had ensured nothing slept again. Epilogue. A whisper. Across time on the edge of a spiral arm, a probe drifted silently through darkness. Ancient, Terran. Its outer shell bore scorch marks. Its power systems flickered. Inside, a beacon pulsed once every century. The message never changed. We were here, we mattered, and we forgive you. Somewhere, someone